I understand that Labour officials went to Rachel Reeves while they were coming up with the manifesto, and they said, look, I think we're really at risk of boxing ourselves in for government if we rule out increasing taxes on working people. And my understanding is that she replied, that would be a nice problem to have. Because I think you have to really understand about the Labour Party is that they're very used to losing. And they have sort of snatched defeat from the jaws of victory many times before. Labour's tax bombshell, they have been really bitten by this. There's a public perception that Labour will increase your taxes, and they wanted to make sure they had economic credibility. They couldn't be hit on that by the Tories, so they went.
Well, the reality, of course, is that making dumb promises like we won't raise income tax or whatever means that is not economically credible. Like, you remove economic credibility by promising that none of these really important taxes will ever go up regardless of the circumstances. Like, that's a box that you've put yourself into that you can now no longer escape from. That is the opposite of economic credibility.
Into the election campaign wanting to make sure that tax increases were nowhere near them, even though really all the experts were saying that whether it was the Tories or Labour, tax increases were inevitable. So we go into the election campaign, and Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer were basically drawn into a game of tax whack-a-mole, where the Tories, one by one, would keep saying, well, you're going to increase capital gains tax, are you going to increase income tax, are you going to unfreeze tax thresholds? And they didn't want to keep ruling things out for government, but they ended up sort of backed into a corner where they had to sort of define that promise of, not increasing taxes on working people. And the way they defined it was by the taxes. And they said that they wouldn't increase the main forms of taxation, which raise, I think, about 75% of the tax income in the UK. So income tax, national insurance and VAT. They said they wouldn't increase any of those. Fast forward, Labour wins the election. They have the last budget. They increase national insurance, but on employers rather than employees. A fudge that was really unpopular with business, but I think for normal working people, they actually kind of landed it that it wasn't a tax increase on them.
I mean, that is true. Because obviously it's not a tax on working people, it's a tax on businesses who are owners. You're taxing owners by doing so. The issue, of course, is that it adds costs onto the price of labour regardless, and therefore can drive down somewhat the level of employment. And we're seeing this in the increased unemployment very recently. I mean, you want to make sure there are enough jobs for people to be able to get. If you make it more expensive to hire, people will hire less. Now, that will change the level of hiring from private to public, so you can do more public sector employment using the dividends that you get from the increased taxation, but they're not doing that. They could have a job guarantee, but they're not doing that to try and deal with the unemployment issue. Like, it wouldn't really be that much of a problem, but they're not doing the necessary state expenditure to be able to deal with the increased unemployment that you'll get from making it harder for businesses to hire. But I think politically, Alva's right. I think they did get away with it. I think they very easily got away with that tax increase because most people don't notice it.
But we've had a year where Rachel Reeves has left herself quite a small buffer. We've basically had a year of speculation about how she will have to increase taxes because, there are calls from the Tories to cut spending further, and they think that they could squeeze the welfare budget more in the Labour side, but pretty much they think they've squeezed it as far as they can. It just has to be tax increases. So we've had a whole year building up to this, and in recent weeks, Rachel Reeves has been laying the ground for a really difficult decision to break that promise, to just go for it, raise income tax because it's the right thing to do, the inevitable thing to do. And they were probably going to do it in a way that they would argue broke the letter of it, but not the spirit of it for reasons that we might come on to. And then today, we have the FT story. Last night, the FT breaks this story that actually they're not going to do that anymore. I'm sure we'll come on to why in a bit more detail, but partly it looks like they've bottled it over the difficult politics.
Because they promised they wouldn't. It's very simple. Like, it's obviously difficult politics. Like, obviously, they understand as much as I do that some taxes need to go up, but people voted on a manifesto that promised no tax rises on these big three, and they shouldn't do that if they want to maintain democratic credibility. It would be such a damning indictment of their election manifesto if they did. They shouldn't have done, and it's bad that they did, but that is what the public voted for, and that's what they should get from that manifesto commitment. Now, the reality is that the reasons for the original briefing that said they were going to raise it and this new briefing that they're not was because of competing economic forecasts. So the NIESR, or the National Institute for Economic and Social Research, puts out a big 5-year-long forecast about where the public finances would go, and essentially said that because of a downgrade in productivity, because of the state of the country, because of the aging population, we were looking like we're going to be £40 billion shortfall by 2029, which would require raising enough taxes to be able to plug that gap overall within those forecasts. And the reason that they brief they might have to do income tax is because you don't increase it by that amount without actually looking at the big three that, as has been pointed out by Alvaria, takes 75% of all taxation in the country. The reason for the U-turn is because they've had new economic data that says a different thing, which is why it's stupid to have fiscal rules that are based upon predictions made by people who don't have crystal balls about what the next 5 years of the economy is going to look like. That's what the fiscal rules do to the government in terms of constraining how they set policy. It's because it's based upon economic forecasting that naturally will be incorrect most of the time. Just do policy, create policy. In fact, I kind of agree with Andrew Marr's position from earlier this week that if you just get rid of a budget and you pass fiscal policies if and when you need them, but regardless, the only reason we're in this position is because they're reacting to predictions rather than off of real economic data. And so these forecasts will change. The fiscal rules will therefore mean that that new forecast changes how much they need to raise taxes by to hit those fiscal rules based upon those predictions. So suddenly there's no need to raise those taxes anymore. That's the reality here. Those first reports in the Financial Times, the Chancellor decided to not proceed following the estimates suggesting a gap in the public finances is £10 billion smaller than previously thought. So their plan really is to do a kind of big gamma smorgasbord style effect where they raise a lot of little taxes everywhere else to find this slightly smaller increase to meet those fiscal rules based upon the new predictions. I believe they're going to continue doing a freeze of tax bands, which is called fiscal drag. They promised they would stop doing that, but they are going to continue doing that, which technically is raising tax on working people, just not raising the rates, because it's just keeping it the same as a rate on the same thresholds, but it means that you're getting taxed more in real terms because your salary is worth less because of inflation.
We saw what happened with the Lib Dems when they broke their pledge not to increase student tuition fees. I think that, David Cameron never broke a manifesto promise, as far as I'm aware. It was his thing. You can't break a manifesto promise. It's just too politically difficult. There have been so many...
No, it's not politically difficult. It's wrong. It's wrong to break a manifesto commitment. The manifesto is what you give to the public so that they can vote in full knowledge of what you will and won't do. If you make a promise, breaking it is just morally incorrect. Now, it's politically difficult also, but that's less important than the moral implications of getting elected into a position of huge amounts of power and responsibility off the back of lies. Now, we could go through Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' many lies in the manifesto and outside the manifesto, both for the leadership election and the general election, or we want to do so, and they are also morally incorrect, but they haven't been politically drawn over the coals, but they will do for this latest one, but it is morally incorrect either way. If you want an idea of why people don't like manifesto pledges being broken, just look at Ukraine. They deposed a sitting prime minister and chased him out of the country because of breaking a manifesto commitment. We did very similar things to our heads of state, or our kind of political leaders. Although I'll also point out that the reality of the Lib Dems' demise wasn't because they broke a pledge on tuition fees, bad as that was, it was because of the whole side thing from the austerity years. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.